There are people who walk into a room and immediately make themselves smaller, not because they lack confidence, not because they are ashamed, but because something deep inside them decided, a long time ago, that being seen was dangerous. Maybe that person is you. Maybe you are the one who finishes a project and quietly slides it across the table without saying a word. Maybe you are the one who achieves something remarkable and then changes the subject when someone brings it up. Maybe you deflect compliments like they are incoming objects you need to dodge. Maybe you laugh it off. Maybe you say something like, "Oh, it was nothing really," and then you move on, and nobody ever knows what it cost you to get there. This video is not about people who are modest. This is about something quieter and older and more complicated than modesty. This is about the psychology of people who cannot stand to show off, who feel a kind of discomfort so physical, so real, when attention turns toward them that it almost feels like a threat. This is about you. If you have ever felt more comfortable in the shadows than in the light, even when the light was yours to stand in, take a breath. We are going to go slowly. You do not announce your wins, not on social media, not in conversations, not even in the quiet space of your own thoughts. When something good happens, there is a strange ritual you perform almost automatically. You minimize it. You contextualize it. You find every reason why it does not count as much as it seems, why anyone could have done it, why luck was involved, why you do not deserve the full weight of the moment. Other people post about their promotions. You wonder why anyone would do that. Other people share their achievements with ease and brightness, and you watch them and feel something you cannot quite name, a mix of admiration and discomfort, like watching someone do something you were told was forbidden. You have opinions in meetings that you do not voice until someone else says the same thing, and then you let them have the credit because at least the idea got heard. You do the hard work backstage. You stay late, you care deeply, and then when recognition comes, something in your body tightens. You want to disappear. You are generous with praise for others. You celebrate people around you genuinely, without jealousy, with real warmth. But when the direction reverses, when someone tries to celebrate you, you become almost allergic to it. You might have been told this is humility. You might have believed that, but somewhere underneath that word, something else is living. Here is what that something else might be. There is a concept in developmental psychology called contingent self-worth. It describes what happens when, as a child, your value felt like it was always attached to performance, to approval, to whether the adults around you were pleased. Not love as a baseline, love as a reward, a moving target. And children are brilliant at adaptation, so you adapted. You learned that wanting recognition was greedy. You learned that standing out made you vulnerable. You learned that the safest version of you was the version that needed the least. But before we give it that clinical name, let us sit inside the experience first. Think about what it felt like to want something as a child, and to be told that wanting was too much. Think about the times you were excited, genuinely lit up by something, and the room went quiet or uncomfortable or dismissive. Think about the adults who modeled for you that needing attention was a character flaw, that people who talked about themselves were shallow, that showing off was the same as arrogance. You absorbed all of that. Children always do. And so the part of you that wanted to be seen learned to go underground. It did not disappear. It just stopped asking out loud. Psychologists call the internal belief system that forms around this kind of conditioning internalized shame. Not shame about a specific thing you did, but a deeper, older shame about what you are, about your needs themselves, about the act of wanting to matter. You did not choose this belief. It was installed quietly over years, through small moments that accumulated like sediment, until one day you looked in the mirror and your natural resting position was self-erasure. That is not humility. Humility is a conscious, grounded relationship with your own worth, one that neither inflates nor deflates. What you have been carrying is something heavier, something that does not feel like a choice because it stopped feeling like a choice a long time ago. And here is what makes this particularly complicated. The world often rewards you for it. People call you humble. People trust you because you do not seem to have an agenda. Colleagues rely on you because you do not make things about yourself. In a culture saturated with personal branding and relentless self-promotion, your quietness can read like wisdom, like integrity. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it genuinely is. But sometimes, under the surface, it is also exhaustion. It is the ongoing labor of making yourself invisible. It is the silent grief of contributing something real, and then standing outside the window watching other people be celebrated for less. That gap between what you give and what you allow yourself to receive is where a particular kind of loneliness lives. Breathe for a moment. This next part matters. In relationships, this pattern shows up in ways that are tender and painful in equal measure. You give freely. You show up for people. You hold space. You remember things. You invest without keeping score. But when someone tries to pour into you, you become uncomfortable in a way you probably cannot fully explain. You redirect. You say you are fine when you are not. You ask about them instead of answering the question about yourself. Part of you believes, not loudly, not in words you would say out loud, but in a deep structural way, that you are more valuable as a giver than as a receiver. That your worth in a relationship is tied to your usefulness. That if you stopped performing your role, the relationship might not survive. Psychologists sometimes call this the caretaker identity, or the helper role, a pattern often rooted in early environments where love was not unconditional, where care had to be earned through service, where the child learned that their emotional needs were inconvenient or unsafe to express, and so the adult you became is deeply skilled at attuning to others and deeply unskilled at letting others attune to you. The unexpected angle here, the twist that most people do not see coming, is this. Refusing to let yourself be celebrated is not actually selfless. It is self-protective. The thing that looks like generosity, the deflection, the minimizing, the redirection, it is partly armor. Because if you let someone fully see how much your work means to you, if you let yourself fully claim a win, then there is something to lose. And somewhere deep in your nervous system, that feels terrifying. What saved you then imprisons you now. That sentence. Let it land. There was a time in your life when making yourself small kept you safe, when not wanting too much protected you from disappointment, when giving more than you received felt like a form of control in an environment where you had very little. The strategy was intelligent. It was adaptive. It was exactly what you needed to survive that chapter. But you are not in that chapter anymore. And yet your body does not fully know that. Your nervous system still runs the old program. It still flinches when attention comes your way. It still contracts when someone says, "You should be proud of yourself." It still reaches for the self-deprecating comment like a reflex before you have had a chance to think. Every time someone praises me, I feel like I need to apologize for something. That line, that quiet, private, almost embarrassing truth that some of you have never said out loud. You feel it, do you not? The strange guilt of being acknowledged. The discomfort of taking up space, even space you have clearly earned. This is the emotional center of everything. This is the thing underneath all the behavior, underneath the modesty and the self-erasure and the inability to post about your own life without feeling like you are doing something wrong. You do not fully believe you deserve to be seen, not because you are broken, not because something is permanently wrong with you, but because the world you learned and taught you that your visibility was a burden to others, or a risk to yourself, or a mark of character weakness. And you believed it, because you were young, and the people who taught you that were large, and the lessons were repeated enough times that they became indistinguishable from truth. That is the most honest, most painful, most real sentence in this entire script. You believed it, and a part of you might still believe it now. Sit with that for a moment. You do not have to fix it right now. Just let yourself see it clearly. Now here is where the road opens slightly. Not a dramatic opening, not a sudden revelation that rewrites everything, just a small, quiet crack of light in a wall that has been solid for a very long time. You have a choice, not an easy one. Not one you can make once and be done with, but a real one, available to you, starting right now. The choice is not to become someone who shows off. The choice is not to start posting every achievement or performing your confidence for an audience. That would just be swapping one performance for another. The choice is something quieter, to begin questioning whether the rules you have been living by actually belong to you. Because some of the beliefs you carry about visibility, about wanting recognition, about what it means to need to be seen, those are not your beliefs. They were given to you. They were written into you before you were old enough to consent to them, and for a long time they served a function. But they are not facts. This is where shadow work becomes relevant, not as a buzzword, but as a practice, as a way of sitting with the parts of yourself that you were taught to hide, the part that wanted to be celebrated, the part that worked incredibly hard and wanted someone to notice, the part that, underneath all the giving and all the self-erasure, has been quietly, privately longing for someone to just once look at you and say, "That was extraordinary. You did that." I spent so long trying not to need anything from anyone. I did not realize that was its own kind of loneliness. That longing is not weakness. It is not vanity. It is one of the most human things that exists. The need to matter to someone. The need for your effort to be witnessed. Children who are never told, "I see you," do not grow up needing less of that. They grow up needing it more, and they spend their whole adult lives trying not to show it. Here is a question worth sitting with, not to answer right now, but to carry. What would it feel like to let someone fully see something you are proud of, without immediately minimizing it, without the apology, without the deflection? Not forever, not in every context, just once. What would happen in your body? What fear would rise up? What old voice would start speaking? You do not have to silence that voice. You just have to start noticing that it is a voice, not the truth. There is a concept in self-compassion research developed by Dr. Kristen Neff called common humanity. The idea is that suffering and imperfection are not private failures, they are shared human experiences. What that means for you, in this context, is that the discomfort you feel around visibility is not a personal flaw. Millions of people carry exactly this. People who were raised in environments where they were taught, explicitly or through absence, that their light was too much, that their needs were inconvenient, that the safest version of them was the smallest version. You are not uniquely damaged. You are humanly shaped by the life you lived, and you are allowed to reshape yourself. Not all at once, not through force, but slowly, carefully, the way you would tend to something fragile and important. You are allowed to start practicing, in the smallest possible ways, the act of receiving, saying thank you without an immediate qualifier, letting a compliment land for 3 seconds before deflecting, sharing something you made without framing it with apology. These are not grand gestures. They are the tiniest possible rewrites of a very old story. Letting someone see you is not the same as giving them power over you. That distinction matters, because for a long time, being seen has felt synonymous with being vulnerable to judgment, to rejection, to the particular cruelty of being found insufficient after you have let yourself be fully visible. But that is not the only version of being seen. That is the version your wound taught you. There is another version, the one where being seen is simply being known, where visibility is not risk, but connection. And maybe, slowly, you can begin to let that version have a little more space. We started this conversation with an image, a person walking into a room and making themselves smaller, the body language of someone who has learned that brightness draws danger, the careful, practiced art of taking up less space than you are actually allowed. And we have traveled a long way from that image, through the architecture of how that smallness got built, through the childhood environments that made invisibility feel like safety, through the relationships where you give and almost never receive, through the grief of the gap between what you offer and what you allow yourself to claim. We have not fixed anything. That was never the goal, but maybe something has shifted just slightly in the way you understand yourself. Maybe the self-erasure that has felt like humility or selflessness now looks a little different. Not bad, not shameful, just human, just old. Just a strategy that made sense once and does not have to be permanent. There are still things I want to leave with you that do not resolve cleanly because life does not resolve cleanly. You will probably still deflect compliments sometimes. You will probably still feel that tightening in your chest when someone points at your work and calls it remarkable. You will probably still reach for the self-deprecating comment before you fully think about it. These are deeply grooved patterns, and they do not disappear because you understand them. But understanding them changes your relationship to them. When the tightening comes, you can notice it. You can say, "There it is, the old reflex, the old belief that I do not deserve this." And you can choose, not always, but sometimes, to pause inside that moment and not immediately comply with the reflex. I am allowed to take up space. I am still learning what that means. That sentence is not a resolution. It is an ongoing practice. And here's the thing about people who do not show off, the ones who have carried this particular quietness for a long time. You often have an extraordinary capacity for depth. Because you have spent so much time watching rather than performing, you have learned to see things others miss. You have learned to be genuinely curious about other people because you have not been caught in the constant project of managing your own image. You have built something real and internal, a sense of self that is not dependent on applause, and that is genuinely rare. The work is not to become someone who needs the spotlight. The work is to stop hiding from it when it rightfully belongs to you. There is a difference between choosing not to show off and being unable to be seen. One is integrity. The other is a wound in the shape of a virtue. You are allowed to know which one you have been carrying. You are allowed to set it down. Not all at once. Not today if today is too much, but when you are ready, in the smallest way. In the way that feels like a door you have been standing in front of for years, with your hand almost touching the handle. The room on the other side is not a room where you have to perform, or broadcast, or become someone you are not. It is just a room where you are allowed to be fully present, fully real, and fully enough, without apology, without deflection, without the old, exhausting ritual of making yourself smaller than you are. And maybe, when you finally step through that door, you will realize the most surprising thing of all. Nobody was ever asking you to disappear. That was always a story you told yourself in a place and a time when it was the only story that felt safe. But you are here now. You made it. And the story gets to change. The room is quiet. The night is deep. Somewhere, someone is sliding their work across a table without saying a word, hoping someone will notice without them having to ask. And maybe tonight, for the first time, they will let themselves stay in the room long enough to see what happens next. Would you like me to adjust the pacing, swap out any psychological references, or make the ending land differently?